Okay, so you know how sometimes you hear about a crime and it just sticks with you, like it gets under your skin and you keep thinking about it?
Yeah,
It's
definitely.
not always the ones with the crazy chases or, like the big aha moment when they catch the bad guy. Sometimes the ones that really get you are the ones that like you think, wow, that could happen to anybody.
Oh, yeah. For sure. Like the ones that expose some kind of vulnerability that we all have makes you feel like anyone could be a victim.
Right, exactly. And the case we're diving into today is one of those, the don't pick up the phone case. It's seriously messed up. And what makes it even more disturbing is that it wasn't just one isolated thing, it was a pattern. Like a whole series of events that spanned over a decade.
Oh, wow. Over a decade.
Yeah, and all through phone calls. Someone who was manipulating people over the phone for years.
That's crazy. I mean, the phone, it's such an everyday thing. You don't really think of it as a weapon, you know?
Right. It's like, who would think a simple phone call could be used to cause so much harm?
So, what exactly happened in these calls?
Well, basically, someone was impersonating a police officer and using their supposed authority to convince managers at fast food places and grocery stores to do all sorts of awful things to their employees.
Like, what kind of things?
We're talking strip searches, humiliating acts, even sexual assault in some cases. It's really heavy stuff.
Oh my God, that's terrible. How did they even get people to do those things just over the phone?
That's what's so fascinating and so disturbing about this whole case. It really exposes how powerful perceived authority can be.
Yeah, I guess when someone says they're the police, you tend to believe them. You're raised to respect law enforcement.
Exactly. It's like this ingrained societal response. You're taught to trust and obey, even if what they're asking sounds completely out there.
So, where do we even begin with a case like this? It sounds huge.
Well, a lot of people remember the incident that really brought it all to light, the one that put it on the map, so to speak. The 2004 McDonald's case in Mount Washington, Kentucky. You've probably heard about that one.
Vaguely, yeah. I think I remember something about it on the news or something.
It was a big deal. It was all over the news. But here's the thing, and this is important for our deep dive today. Those manipulative calls, they didn't just start in 2004.
There's a lot more to it than just that McDonald's case.
Way more. Our sources indicate these calls had been happening for years before that.
Really?
Yeah, like way back in the early 90s.
Wow, so this was going on for a long time before anyone really caught on.
Exactly. And that's why we need to go back to the beginning, to those early calls, to really understand how this whole thing unfolded.
Okay, so let's rewind then. Back to the early 90s. What were the first signs of this pattern? Where did it all start?
Well, it seems the caller kind of started small, like testing the waters.
What do you mean?
Well, the initial targets were mostly fast food chains, places like Taco Bell, Burger King, Wendy's, places with a lot of young employees and high turnover.
Yeah, I guess those places might seem like easier targets.
Right. And the caller always used the same basic tactic. He'd call pretending to be a police officer.
Did he use a fake name?
Yeah, usually something generic but believable, like Officer Scott or Detective Wilson. Nothing too flashy or memorable.
Smart. Keep it simple.
Exactly. And he'd say he was investigating some minor crime, maybe a small theft or like suspicion of drug use by an employee.
Ah, so just something plausible enough that the manager would take it seriously.
Exactly. And then he would give a vague description of a young female employee, always female. And he'd convince the manager to detain this employee in the back office or something.
Oh, wow. So he was already manipulating people into isolating the young women right from the start.
Yep, and the descriptions he gave, they were always pretty general, like wouldn't really narrow it down to a specific person. But the crazy thing is, a lot of these managers, they just went along with it.
That's wild. I mean, I guess they probably didn't want to get in trouble with the police, right?
I think that's part of it. It's that fear of authority, like we were talking about earlier.
Right, of course. Who trucks to question a cop?
And then once he had them isolated, he'd escalate things.
Escalate.
Yeah, he'd start making more demands. He'd tell the manager to search the employee to look for stolen goods or drugs. And he'd say it had to be a strip search.
Oh, God, no way. Did they actually do it?
Sadly, yeah. In a lot of cases, they did. These managers, they were completely taken in by this guy on the phone. They were convinced he was a real cop, and they were terrified of disobeying him.
It's hard to believe that someone could be so easily manipulated.
It really is. But it just goes to show how easily people can be swayed by authority, even when it's just a voice on the other end of the line.
So it started with strip searches, but I have a feeling it didn't end there, did it?
No, it got way worse. As time went on, the calls got bolder, the demands got more extreme. He started involving other people, like other employees or even customers.
Oh my God, he was bringing more and more people into this sick game.
Exactly. And eventually, he started demanding sexual acts. It was like he was getting off on the powers, on the control he had over these people.
This is just awful. It's hard to even fathom how someone could do this.
It really is. And, this wasn't just happening in one town or even one state. This was widespread. Our sources indicate these calls were happening all over the country: Kentucky, Texas, Missouri, Massachusetts, all over the place.
So he wasn't just targeting a specific area or type of person.
Nope. It seems he was casting a pretty wide net. And by the time that McDonald incident happened in 2004, authorities estimated he'd made over 70 of these calls.
Over 70 calls.
Yeah, and at least 30 of them resulted in documented strip searches or assaults.
Wow. That's insane. It's hard to believe this went on for so long without anyone catching him.
Well, it did, and it was that McDonald's case in 2004 that finally brought it all to an end. That was the one that made everyone sit up and take notice.
Right. That's the one I vaguely remember hearing about.
So let's talk about that case in detail, because it's not just about catching the bad guy. It's also about the victims and what they went through.
Yeah, definitely. We need to remember that real people were hurt by this guy.
Absolutely. So it all went down on April 9th, 2004 at a McDonald's in Mount Washington, Kentucky. The assistant manager there, her name was Donna Summers, she got a call from a guy claiming to be Officer Scott.
The same MO as the other calls.
Yep, same old story. He said a customer's purse had been stolen, and he suspected one of the employees, an 18-year-old cashier named Louise Ogborn.
So what did Donna Summers do?
Well, she believed him. She thought he was a real cop, so she did what he said. She took Louise to the back office and detained her.
And that's when things started to escalate.
Exactly. The caller, this Officer Scott, he told Summers to strip search Louise. He said it was necessary to find the stolen purse.
Oh, God, that's awful. What did Louise do?
Well, imagine being 18 years old, working your first job, and then some guy claiming to be a cop tells your manager to strip search you.
I can't even imagine.
It's a nightmare scenario. And Louise, she was terrified. She didn't know what to do. So she was what they told her.
Oh, my God. This is just heartbreaking.
I know. And it gets worse. Summers, at some point, she starts to hesitate. Maybe she was getting uncomfortable with the situation. So the caller tells her to get someone else involved. He says she's too busy.
Oh, no, he was pulling someone else into this.
Yep. Summers, she calls her fiancé, a guy named Walter Nix Jr., to come down to the McDonald's, and he gets sucked into the whole thing, too.
So now it's two people being manipulated by this guy on the phone.
Right. And for the next 2 hours, it's just this horrific ordeal for Louise. Nix, under the caller's instructions, he forces her to undress, makes her do jumping jacks naked, all kinds of degrading things, and it culminates in sexual assault.
This is just beyond disturbing. It's hard to believe this actually happened.
I know. And the caller, he stayed on the phone the entire time. Like, he was direct of the whole thing, making sure his orders were followed.
It's like he was getting some kind of sick pleasure out of it. The control, the power. It's just twisted.
Absolutely. It's like a real-life horror movie. And Louise, she was begging them to stop, telling them it was wrong. But they just kept going. Summers even checked in a few times, but she didn't stop it. She still believed the caller was a cop.
Wow. It's just so messed up on so many levels.
Thankfully, it did eventually come to an end. A maintenance worker named Thomas Sims, he came in at some point to relieve Nix, and he was the only one who questioned what was going on. He was like, this is wrong. We need to call the real police.
Thank God for that guy. He was the only one with any sense.
Right. He was the only one who saw through the whole thing.
Right.
And as soon as Summers mentioned calling the real police, guess what happened?
What?
The caller hung up, like he was gone, vanished into thin air.
Of course he did. He knew the jig was up.
Exactly. But the damage was done. Louise had been through this unimaginable ordeal, and it was all because of this manipulative jerk on the other end of the phone.
This is one of those cases that just stays with you. It makes you wonder, how could something like this happen?
Well, that's what the police wanted to figure out, too. And this McDonald's case, it was the key. It finally gave them enough to connect all the dots, to see the bigger picture.
So how did they start piecing it all together? What was the first break in the case?
Well, they traced the call to the McDonald's, and they found out it was made from a prepaid phone card.
A prepaid phone card. That makes sense. It's untraceable.
Exactly. But they were able to find out where the card was purchased. It was bought at a Walmart in Panama City, Florida.
Okay, so they knew where the call came from, but did they know who made it?
They went to the Walmart and looked at the security footage from the time the card was purchased, and they saw a man buying the card.
And were they able to identify him?
Yep. They identify him as David Richard Stewart, 38 years old, married, father of 2. And get this, he was a former corrections officer.
A former corrections officer. Wow, so he had experience with law enforcement. That makes sense.
Right. It explains how he was able to sound so convincing on the phone. He knew how to use police jargon, how to sound authoritative.
So they had their suspect. Did he have a criminal record?
Nope. He was squeaky clean. But they dug a little deeper and found out he also worked for a private security firm. So again, he was in a position of authority.
Right, he was used to giving orders and having people obey.
Exactly. And he lived near Panama City, where that phone card was purchased. So the pieces were starting to fall into place.
So they had him on the security footage buying the phone card. Was there any other evidence linking him to the McDonald's case?
They got phone records from the Panama City area and were able to link that same prepaid card to other calls made around the times of those other incidents.
So they couldn't say for sure he made the McDonald's call, but they knew the same card was used in a bunch of similar cases.
Exactly. And the way he operated in all these calls, it was just too similar to be a coincidence. The police, they're convinced it was him. They believed he was using his knowledge of law enforcement to manipulate these people.
It all fits, doesn't it?
Yeah. It's scary how perfectly he fit the profile. And the thing is, he would stay on the phone with these victims for a long time, sometimes hours. He was really controlling the situation, making sure they didn't question his authority.
Wow. So they arrested him for the McDonald's case?
They did. They charged him with impersonating a police officer, soliciting sodomy, and soliciting sexual abuse.
Those are serious charges.
They are. But here's the thing. Proving those charges in court, it wasn't so easy.
Why not?
Well, those prepaid phone cards, they're designed to be anonymous. So even though they had him on camera buying the card, it was hard to definitively link him to every single call.
And the victims, they only heard his voice on the phone, right?
Right. And it's not like they could easily identify him in a lineup. If anything, it's hard to remember a voice, especially after such a traumatic experience.
So did they go to trial?
They did in 2006 in Bullitt County, Kentucky.
And
He was acquitted.
what? How could that happen?
The jury, they just couldn't unanimously agree that he was the voice on the phone. There was enough reasonable doubt, and they couldn't convict him.
Wow. So he got away with it.
Legally, yes, but that doesn't mean he wasn't responsible. And the impact of his actions, well, that's something he can't escape.
So what happened after the trial? Did anything good come out of this whole mess?
Well, Louise Osborne, she sued McDonald's.
Sued them. Why?
She argued that they should have done more to protect their employees. She said that McDonald's knew about these hoax calls, that they had happened at other McDonald's before, and they didn't do anything to prevent it.
So McDonald's was aware this was a problem.
It seems so, and they were probably worried about bad publicity, so they didn't want to make a big deal out of it.
That's messed up.
Yeah. And Louise, she deserved justice, so she took him to court, and in 2007, she won. McDonald's had to pay her a $6.1 million settlement.
Wow, $6.1 million. That's a lot of money.
It is, but it can't really make up for what she went through. No amount of money can erase that trauma.
So what about Donna Summers and Walter Nix Jr.? What happened to them?
Well, Summers, she lost her job at McDonald's and pleaded guilty to unlawful imprisonment for her role in detaining Louise. She got probation.
And Nix?
He pleaded guilty to sexual abuse and served 5 years in prison. He later said he was manipulated by the caller, that he felt compelled to obey.
I mean, I get that he was manipulated too, but he still committed a crime.
He did, and he had to face the consequences for his actions. But this whole case, it really raises some important questions about authority and obedience.
It's like that Milgram experiment, right? The one where people were told to shock other people and they did it because someone in a lab coat told them to.
Exactly. It shows how easily we can be influenced by authority figures, even when we know what we're doing is wrong.
And it's even more powerful when that authority is coming from law enforcement, right? Because we're conditioned to trust them, to believe they have our best interests at heart.
Absolutely. And that's what makes this whole case so disturbing. It shows how easily that trust can be exploited.
So did anything positive come out of this whole thing?
Well, after the Mount Washington incident, McDonald's and other chains, they implemented new policies to prevent this from happening again.
Like what kind of policies?
Well, they started requiring employees to verify any police requests over the phone. Like they had to call 911 to confirm that the caller was a real cop.
That's a good idea. It seems so obvious, but I guess it wasn't standard practice before.
It wasn't. And sadly, it took a tragedy like this to make them change their policies.
And what about those other victims, the ones from the earlier calls? Did they ever get justice?
After the Mount Washington case went public, a bunch of other victims came forward. But for many of them, it was too late. Too much time had passed, or the statute of limitations had expired.
So they couldn't prosecute the caller for those earlier cases?
Not really, which is really frustrating because he got away with abusing so many people.
And what about David Stewart? What happened to him after the trial?
He went back to Florida and pretty much disappeared from the public eye. He's always maintained his innocence, and no one else has ever been charged with those calls.
But the calls stopped after his arrest, right?
Yeah, they did, which is pretty telling. But without concrete evidence, it's all just speculation.
So we may never know for sure if he was responsible for all those other calls.
Probably not, but this case, it's more than just about one guy. It's about the darker side of human nature, the potential for manipulation and abuse that exists even in the most ordinary settings.
It's really scary to think that something as simple as a phone call could be used to cause so much harm.
It is, and it makes you think twice about who you trust and how easily we can be manipulated by authority.
Exactly. And it reminds us to be critical thinkers, to question things that don't seem right, even if it's coming from someone who claims to be in a position of power.
Absolutely, and that's really the takeaway here. This case, it's a cautionary tale. It's a reminder that we all need to be aware of the potential for manipulation and that we need to be vigilant in protecting ourselves and others. And it's a reminder that authority should never be blindly obeyed. We always have a right to question, to verify, to make sure things are truly what they seem. And sometimes not picking up the phone might be the best decision you can make.
You've given us a lot to think about. Thanks for bringing this case to light.
Thanks for joining me. And to all our listeners out there, stay safe and stay vigilant.